Hi there, I'm Jill Chivers from 16 Style Types.
I'm Imogen Lambert from 16 Style Types.
And I'm Jane Kesey from 16 Style Types. And actually, you can probably tell that I don't live in the same country as the other two, even though we all have the same love of helping people figure out their most stylish selves.
Jane is the only one who has managed to change her background. So she has a beautiful background. Jane, do you want to tell us where your background is from behind you?
My background is in a little town called Whitchurch, England, where I was supposed to be on Sunday, having Sunday roast with some good friends. And so I've just been enjoying virtual backgrounds and pretending I'm where I'm not.
Yeah. So we brought you another video a little while back on ways in which you could use your understanding of type, and specifically the functions of extroversion and introversion, the attitudes of extroversion and introversion, to help you understand how the measures that are being put in place by governments around the world around social isolation. Am I even saying that correctly? You know what I mean. Distancing and staying away from other people, staying at home, how you can use that understanding to help you get a grip on what you're experiencing, and ways in which you can use it to help you be as healthy as possible during this unprecedented time of global change. So what we want to do in this video was talk about some of the other elements of psychological type and how understanding those can also be of help to you. Of course, the extroversion and introversion one is a really obvious one because it's about energy, and that's impacting all of us, whether we are extroverted or introverted. But the other elements of type to do with our functions, sensing, intuition, thinking and feeling, and then the final attitude pair of judging and perceiving, they can also be impacting on you and how you're experiencing what you're experiencing, and maybe adding to your suffering. And what we wanted to do was provide you with some insights that we have, and hopefully that might help you get another angle or perspective on what you're experiencing. So we actually thought we might go through what are called the 8 functions. So these are the 2 middle letters of your type, and whether or not that function is extroverted or introverted, because a lot of people understand this now about type. There's a lot of depth of knowledge about how the nature of type is dynamic. So we thought we might do it that way, and then you could follow along, and when we talk about the function or the functions that apply to you, you might pick up some ideas that are going to be helpful to you. So that's what we thought we would talk about. Is there anything else I've missed, Imogen or Jane, on how we thought we might approach this?
I think that's where we'll start, and then we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, I think the big thing to keep in mind is that every type has a dominant function, like your leading force, what people hire you to do. And in a crisis like this, it just so happens that how it's affecting you has a lot to do with what that function is. We're all affected, but what is, you might even say, pissing us off or making us the most sad, or the hardest to deal with, or in some cases where we're actually coping with it better than other people, is often tied to this function. And so we're going to go through them and give some tips or give some information on what might be hard right now, and then what you might do about it, given what we know about how these functions work together. Because type isn't just adding letters together. You know, I'm not just I plus N plus F plus J. There's a dynamic interaction of those letters. So we're going to start with extroverted sensing, because that's often the one talked about first. And the extroverted sensor's biggest...
Can I just...
yeah, go ahead.
Maybe we'll just do a quick table of contents, the 8 that we're going to do, and then and just so people know the order that we're going to do them, and then we'll jump into the first one, maybe?
Okay, we're going to start with the ones that have to do with information. So extroverted and introverted sensing, extroverted and introverted intuition. Then we'll go to the ones that are about how we decide, extroverted and introverted thinking, and extroverted and introverted feeling. And if those are rather unfamiliar terms, don't worry. You're going to recognize yourself. We'll say what types are involved. So,
plus we do have blog posts where we explain some of this as well. So, of course, head on over to our blog as well at 16styletypes.com.
Thank you for reminding us of the wealth of information that really is out there already. So extroverted sensing, our governor here in Minnesota he calls it safer at home. That's instead of social isolation or stay in place or shelter in place. I don't, it's kind of an interesting title because it's actually helping people personalize it. Oh, this is good for me. I mean, I think there's type implications in the governors that have chosen to do that here. Of course, because all of ours are autonomous. There's several things that our commander-in-chief cannot tell the states to do. So, but at any rate, I am safer at home with an extroverted sensor. The two types that show this are ESTP and ESFP. And in a normal world, ESTPs and ESFPs, the extroverted sensors, are known for finding the best thing to do in the moment. They are so aware of reality that they just plain make things happen. You know, I have a plan and then I go into reality and figure out what should happen. They go into reality and figure out what should happen. So they're often quite taken with some sorts of physical pursuits that take advantage of what you can do in the physical world. And they are often troubleshooters, not you know, like they're often our first responders. They're often more comfortable being an ER doctor, for example, than being someone who does meticulous office work as a physician. You know, so what's toughest for them is how much joy in the moment's been taken away right now. We in Minnesota are still allowed to get outside because we have even our downtown metropolitan area has huge pathways along the rivers and lakes. There's 21 lakes in our metro area. So people are still allowed to go running and biking and walking as long as we maintain social distance. But there's no team sports allowed. You know, and of course, everything's closed here just like for you. So, you know, finding what's right to do now when you're pretty much stuck at home and stuck in place. You know, you can't go do something, you know, go hang out at your buddy's woodworking shop like my better half would normally do and do something together. Anything to add just to like the you know, I'm going to call it trauma because all of us, none of us have ever faced this, you know, the relationships and the social interaction that we'd normally engage in something like this has been stripped away. So we're all experiencing something that's really mind-blowing.
Interesting. Our government actually has, I think, they say we're in it together.
Yeah, apart.
Something that I know there's one where like we're all in the same position. You know, none of us have got the advantage of like you can go out and I can't, or you know.
Except if you live in Stockholm.
Yes. Well, okay, but yeah, the rest of the world is fairly much all you know trying to stay home, isolating themselves to stop the spread. So yeah, it is that sort of thing that. I think remembering that we are all in the same position. It's not like some people are lucky and some people aren't. It doesn't matter your class. It doesn't matter how much money you have. What the thing is, I think it's also really important to remember is that if we have a home to go to, we're actually quite privileged. There are people in the world, you know, I was watching last night on the news who were living in trees because they're in Africa or India and they have no home to go to. Like, remember that sometimes it's also looking at what your bright side is. I have a home to go to. It's safe, it's warm, it's dry. You know, I'm not one of the people in some of those parts of the world that just, you know, the chance of being wiped out by this is incredibly high. And I think that's always something too, is that kind of little reframe to remember that I am incredibly lucky in this. And this is not isolation like, you know, prison isolation with a room with no light, with nothing to do. I've still got like, you know, my kids complain, oh, there's nothing to do. It's like you've got televisions and iPads and games and, you know, like trampolines outside. Like there's many worse off than we are. So I think to me, that's also something that's really important to remember in this.
I think it's been very interesting watching what my husband's doing. He has read, you know, normally, you know, he was a physical education teacher, if that gives you a good picture, very outdoorsy. He has actually not just been reading, but reading literary novels, which I don't recall him ever doing. And that's really using almost the opposite function, using intuition, going into these books with deep themes. Now he's back to more of an adventure story, but he has been asking what else is on the shelves. And what I'm trying to point out is often when you're stuck and can't do what you normally do, you can actually go to your opposite. It sounds counterintuitive, but it actually shuts down what all that longing for what you'd normally do, and gives you a new experience that's novel, that's fun, because you're in control of it. If you were forced into it, it would be awful. But for the extroverted sensors, there's a piece of introverted intuition, imagining what your next trip would be like, not planning it, but imagining, or maybe taking up a science fiction or fantasy novel, or like my husband has a couple of literary novels. I'm just gonna, Jill, what else can you think of that extroverted sensors might do?
Well, I think what's so fascinating and beautiful about type is how it offers many pathways. And, one of the pathways is looking at our opposite. I was talking with our beautiful friend, Sue Blair, who's in isolation in many different ways. She's literally on an island off the main island of the United Kingdom. And she was talking about how John Beebe's recent session online talked about going to the 8th function. So for extroverted sensing, it's deliberately invoking extroverted intuition. And I think that that's also very interesting, that possibilities and ideas popping and having it be going out there like that. And of course, one of the other things is to try and harness your dominant function in a way that works for our current renewed circumstances. So ESTPs, ESFPs are longing for freedom in the moment, responding in the moment, what's happening right now, very active. And so how can you channel your need for that rather than having it either spiral out of control so you become in the grip, or having to squash it or repress it, which of course is never going to work long time. That is completely unsustainable for all of us to have our dominant function squashed or repressed in some way. So one of the things that I think is really helpful is how can I use my need for extroverted sensing, that in the moment responsiveness, that need for activity, in a way that is respectful of and adhering to restraints that are being put on all of us. And so, one of the things is, how can I be active around the house? Or are there any physical projects that I can be involved in? Or, what are some of the ways that I can respond to what I would normally, like if I just wanted to go for a ride on my bike, how can I do that, or whatever it is that I need to do. So I think that's what's so great about type, is you have many ways of saying, okay, how can I look at what I'm experiencing and find a way through whatever is not working for me at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The introverted sensors, it's still about what is, but they're so often also tied to the sense of what should be. And when I say what should be, it's like you watch them interact with a situation, and they draw on past experience and know what could work, would work, should work, could be done. And so one of the and to exquisite detail, but things that I've forgotten ever existed, they'll pull out and I'll go, oh yeah, we could do that again. That's a really good idea. It was great the first time. And memories of things that they enjoyed in the past are often easy for them to bring forth. I'm going to say just one thing that comes to my mind, and then turn it over to you. And now I've lost track of what that was, because I was trying to figure out the better definition. So I'll just throw it up to the two of you while I try and remember that brilliant thought I had.
So introverted sensing, dominant function for ISTJ, ISFJ, stabilizers, high need for things to remain the same, and are really good at maintaining. So processes and procedures, ways of doing things, they're excellent at maintaining them, and they have an exquisite beauty in how they do this. It doesn't seem boring or staid or repetitive, because it's so natural to them, and you have a sense of comfort from that stability. And of course, we're living in a time where stability in all kinds of ways has been taken from us. Psychological stability, emotional stability, for some people, financial stability. There's all kinds of things that are just not stable anymore. And this is where I think that spiraling into the grip of catastrophizing can often happen for some people. And so either harnessing that in a way where it's, as Imogen was saying before, thinking about ideas of what is positive, keeping a gratitude journal, the things that channel your thoughts in a positive way, because they're going there anyway. And what you can control is the channel that they go down. And we have more control over that than I think we often give ourselves credit for. And then harnessing your dominant function, what can you still have stability over? And maybe that's a daily routine. And maybe that's around making meals. Maybe that's around your household. Maybe that's about having some kind of catch-up routine with people where they're on some form of schedule. Okay, this is the 7 days of my week, and here are all the people to stay in contact with, and devising ways in which you can do that through phone or video or email or however you want to do it. These are just a few random ideas of ways you can use your dominant function, but also how you can switch to your inferior function of extroverted intuition and start to use that as well. Type just gives us various options for doing all of those. If we wanted to do the John Beatty thing of going to introverted intuition, that would also be interesting. This was a new one to me. And of course, the two of you having introverted intuition as a dominant function, you might be able to share some things that our ISTJs and our ISFJs might be able to do if they wanted to deliberately try and tap into that.
You know, I've often seen them do almost a blend of, okay, this is the time to pull out the pictures and get the stories you want to hand down to the family down. And I mean that even if you're 20, there are things that you really might want to pass on. And any form of writing, even if you're recalling detail, has a piece of intuition in it, because you're putting symbols on paper. And so that's a simple suggestion.
I've noticed too that they're very organised on the whole. So this is often a great time to plan and reorganise your house. Like if you're in there and you garden, that these are places you have lots of control over. And now is the time to go and do all those things that often we're putting off because we're too busy doing other things. So I've noticed reorganise your wardrobe, reorganise your kitchen cupboards, all those sorts of things. And even things like, get all the photos and, create the scrapbook, because often it's those things with photos and things that we go, yeah, one day I'll get round to, printing them out, doing them, all that sort of stuff. Now's the time. Like now we've got the time. Well, many people do. Not everybody has any more time than they ever used to have. But if you are, I think that's the thing is, I think this is affecting the people who are the least busy in a way. That if you used to fill your life with other things going out, so if you're suddenly not doing your normal job, like I'm still doing the same things I always did. So for me, it's not hard in the same way as it is for the people whose jobs have suddenly disappeared and they've suddenly got this gaping time. And then it's like, how long will it go on for? And what do I do? So I think this is like plan some projects, plan all these different things you can do. And I think that's where it's used that incredible, detailed sense of organisation that can be really useful.
Yeah, and just the act of planning itself can be very soothing for, I would say, all 4 SJ types, but particularly the introverted SJs. So moving on to the intuitives now.
I was going to just say one more thing, because you brought it up, Bill, and that's the piece of catastrophizing. All 4 of the types we talked about are the ones most likely to, whenever they think about the future, they think of what could go wrong. They can't help it. And so if you are in that category, it is really important to take some time to reframe it. This isn't the time of the Spanish flu when they didn't even know how to isolate people or why that would be important. My parents lived through the Depression and World War II and the Spanish flu, and I'm not making light of our current situation. I'm saying we can stop our catastrophizing by remembering we aren't the first people to go through this. We didn't have a monsoon rip through our town. We didn't have an earthquake or a nuclear accident. We just have coronavirus, and we will get through this. And it's really important for these 4 types to somehow, whether you have to put a poster up or, repeat it, or stop the thoughts with a happy picture of a party 5 years from now or whatever. It's really key to surviving this.
And just to step back from that, what we're talking about here is the difference between sensing and intuition, sensing that attendance to the detail and the here and now and past experience versus putting that into a bigger context. And so we just talked about the four sensing types, and what they can often struggle with is putting things into that bigger context, that global perspective, which is of course the intuitives come by that more naturally. And so that's a really nice segue to talking about the four intuitive types.
Yeah. And we'll start with the extroverted intuitives, the ENTPs and ENFPs. These are our catalysts that get the rest of us thinking about new things, new ideas, new ways of being, new ways of thinking about life, the universe, and everything in it, and often get us very excited about things.
Yeah. Yeah, and conversely, dealing with the details tends to be something that if they're any good at it, it's been a learned skill. They've had to learn that. So depending on their circumstances, they may find themselves attending with a lot of details, potentially technical details, such as how to use Zoom. I'm finding a lot of the facilitators in my sphere have a preference for intuition, and they're having to come to grips with technical details that are not their forte. And there's a lot of frustration and people helping, and let's do a little technical Zoom so people can learn how to do all this stuff for themselves, and it's causing a lot of frustration because they are the big picture thinkers and the those that generate all these different ideas, and then they often are best when they move on to the next idea and somebody else picks up the follow through. And not all of our ENFPs and ENTPs have the luxury of being able to do that now.
Yeah.
And I think it's like you can't, there's probably at the moment where I can have great ideas, but maybe I can't put them into play because of what's going on. So, and I think that's probably incredibly frustrating for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a couple things from my extroverted intuitive friends. One is they can go down the information hole. There's so much reading that we can do right now about what's going on in the world, and they can get drawn away and 3 hours later realize they didn't get anywhere closer to one of the wonderful possibilities they'd thought of for the day. And I think, with all their, wow, I could use this time to write the great American novel or the great Australian novel or whatever, or I could finally learn to do calligraphy, or I could clean out all my closets. And I think a lot of them, even 2 weeks into social distancing, are starting to realize if I don't get a plan, I've wasted 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's very common to have all these ideas and not get around to it. And so even as they go, okay, this is going to be a gift. This is going to be something we,
Right.
this rock bottom of, oh my gosh, I've been avoiding things. I've been bouncing is starting to hit them.
So
I read something really
introverted senses book and start to plan in a bit more detail exactly how they, like the steps that they're going to take to do all these things.
Yeah. I read something funny that I think an extroverted intuitive had written while they were channeling, which is, when this first started, I was going to learn to meditate and then finally learn Spanish online. And by day 3, I was just dumping the ice cream directly on top of the cereal. One of the things I do with extroverted intuitives, all the NP types when planning, is I don't suggest using planning tools like Excel or those kinds of things, but do it with Post-it notes or big pieces of colored paper, something that gives you a sense of flexibility, that you're not actually casting this in stone. So if you have the physical space to be able to maybe do up a weekly plan with Post-its where things can be moved around, so if something doesn't get Monday, it doesn't actually drop off the list, it's easily moved. So just something that works with your natural functions, but still you're tapping into that sensing function. So introverted sensing, that sense of sort of maybe perhaps detailed planning, or if we wanted to do the John Beebe going to your 8th function, extroverted sensing, what actions you can take and how you can be responsive in a very practical way. What can be done? What is a pragmatic outcome that can be achieved today, as opposed to, as you were saying, Jane, more data that can be grasped. They're just some of the ways that you can use planning, but in a way that works for your type, because not all of us like to plan the same way.
No. I was actually Zooming with a colleague today who's very extroverted, and she said, how do you sit and write. Now that I can't go, she's the kind that would generally write in a coffee shop or any place where there's things going on so that she doesn't feel just like there's nothing, she needs action in order to sit and think.
I'd be suggesting she takes her phone, dictaphone, and goes for a walk and dictates.
Yeah. That's a really good idea. She's
in a state or a city where they are sheltered at home. Do not go outside because it's so dense.
Another option is get headphones. Headphones and play music.
Yeah.
Yep.
Something that has no words, not necessarily singing, so something that is acoustic but something with a high beat to it. That could also be helpful. So
well, and I will also be writing back to her about bribing yourself in a healthy way. I have a gift card on my dresser to a jewelry store where everything comes in little turquoise boxes, and I will not be going online and shopping at that store until my next book manuscript is turned in next Friday. I'm not spending more. I'm just postponing as a little incentive, and I'm reminding myself I can walk by and that card reminds me to go put my seat back on the chair.
That's right.
So
if it works for 3-year-olds, it can work for us.
Yeah, and for her in this situation, that's an appropriate thing. Bribing with M&Ms would not be a good idea at this point, but so the extroverted intuitives, figuring that piece out. And the biggest stress is they are limited right now. They are very, as opposed to I can do anything I want, they have been snapped into a narrow boundary.
Yeah. And that's a very real constraint. So, of course, the other thing is we'd love for you, when you're watching this, to share your ideas, share your type, and tell us things that you've been doing that have been working. In the interest of time, let's talk about the other two intuitive types, the introverted intuitives, INTJ, of which we have an example, INFJ, of which we have an example. So what are some of the struggles for our introverted intuitives, and what are some of the ways they can be harnessing their use of type to make things better at the moment?
Well, I think, just introverted intuition is about the inner world of ideas and creating what could be in the world of ideas. And so in a sense, we've still got our worlds. And the hardest thing is our worlds have been invaded, and there's other, we aren't sheltered alone. We are sheltered with others for the most part. And so our worlds are constantly being interrupted. And that means that it's like pieces fall away and you can't remember what they were to put them back in place in that, whatever we were creating. So I'll just
be in the zone when you've got other people interrupting you.
Yeah.
The zone is our happy place. It's many people's happy place, but we go there very easily. And I think that's, in fact, in my house, we've just built a wall in my office because it was a bit open plan. And now that my husband's home and his kids home, and it was just like, that is the thing, we have to do this because, our government is saying this, expect us to go for 6 months.
Yeah.
So basically, my husband was told, and he's a public servant, he was told when he was leaving work to come and work from home, expect it to be 6 months.
Yeah.
And so we went, this is not just a couple of weeks. I know that there's many governments saying, it'll just be a couple of weeks, and then it's a couple more, and it's a couple more. We were told basically 6 months. Yeah. So we've just gone, we need to do something that allows us both to have that bit of space and peace to be productive. So I think that's something, things like noise cancelling headphones can be helpful. Like, this is no music. I can't do anything, listen to music. Like, that's completely distracting for me. But something that just makes the world silent, that's much more helpful. If you're allowed to get out for a walk by yourself, I know not everywhere in the world you can. Fortunately, we're allowed to take a walk as long as we're isolated from other people.
I can sing along to songs and write at the same time. So if I know it, I have to know it cold. It has to be something from, but I think for the introverted intuitive, there's that rest that comes from the physical activity and figuring out how to get that. I saw a video clip taken by one of our colleagues of her husband, Colin Hopkirk. His walk is now around the house, and she had a little video of him with his headset on, just charging away. I saw a tape of another man who's actually ran a marathon around his house. you know, and I have a feeling it was not an extrovert. It was probably an introvert. Like, dang it.
Yeah.
So
this is accessing your inferior function of extroverted sensing. So deliberately calling on that.
It can be, you know, introverted sensing can also be, or that the sensing function can be making a recipe from scratch where you have to follow directions, or playing a musical instrument, or something that actually requires you to pay attention in the moment. Just gives the intuition a rest to the point where it's easier to get the most out of it when you've got other people around you. Imogen, what would you say is hardest? What's I mean, to me, it's like we keep thinking of the big picture of this issue. Like, how do we, especially in certain countries where things could have been done, we can't help but, not in a blame game, but we can see so clearly some of the
downfalls. You know, it's sad because there is that sort of thing going on. If only they'd done this or that, and all those people wouldn't be dying. But look, I think it's one of those things. I think actually we may be one of the luckiest types as far as going through this, because really, you know, like as long as we can find that little bit of peace and quiet and some of those things that we really need, we're not going, you know, I don't think we'll go quite as crazy as many of the other types who are finding this a much, much harder thing to deal with. I notice, and when we're going to get onto the decision-making functions now, but my extroverted thinking husband, the number of times at 8:30 at night, I'm tired, I've got to go to bed. And like, you know, we've been home working, but it's the fact that he's not getting that normal level of stimulation. And so he's exhausted. So at 8:30 at night, he's going, I've got to go to bed. When really, he should actually be doing something, you know, like then you need to add more stuff. I think we're segueing into extroverted thinking now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so, and that's what I noticed, whereas I'm not feeling tired like that. You know, I'm really, and part of it is like my own life experiences, which I've had in the past, where I have a philosophy: don't worry about stuff you have no control over, do the things you have control over. You know, worrying about stuff you have no control over is just a huge waste of energy, and energy is a precious resource. And so that's come from a lifetime of having experiences and having a nervous breakdown and all that sort of stuff in my past, where I know that doesn't help me. So I've learned with ways to deal with that. And I watch my husband, I think, oh, you know, how can I, so I'm thinking, okay, we've got to go for a walk and we've got to do something. We've got to play with the dogs and let's do some dog training. Like, let's find some other ways to stimulate that need, that extroverted need, so that you're not tired at 8 o'clock at night going, oh, I've really got to go to bed.
Yeah, and it's the extroverted thinkers usually have the highest energy levels of anyone in the world. You know, I have a child who is an extroverted thinker, and she used to run a preschool room for 24 one-year-olds and then go rollerblading to get rid of her energy. So you know, there's that aspect of our ESTJs and ENTJs, extroverted thinkers, but then there's also the wonderful, they solve problems through planning. They can be very quick plans where they just know, if we move this, do that, this, that, it'll work. But then there's also the 3-month, the 6-month, the 5-year plan that they are used to executing. And a lot of the plans that they had in place aren't moving forward. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles I see with those types right now.
Yeah, or the plans have just been blown up. I'm sure Sue would not mind me sharing this. When we Zoomed last night, 12 or so hours ago, she said, you know, an ESTJ without a plan. I mean, who am I? You know, not being able to plan and mobilize on a plan, and, you know, finding different ways to harness all of that considerable energy, that organized, channeled, focused energy. Which is, of course, ENTJ, ESTJ in their most magnificent natural habitat, is planning, organizing, mobilizing, producing, getting things done. And
this is why I've got a wall happening so quickly.
You know, a lovely example of it channeled in a positive and productive way that's going to help mankind, at least the mankind at your house. So
and we've got a plan over Easter. We're cleaning out the garage, you know, like, so we're planning out what can we do around the house. So that's part of what we're doing with the planning, is what can we do planning around the house that will, you know, keep both of us happy, or as happy as we can be in this current situation. I think that's the thing is we can't expect to be happy like we may normally be happy. We have to kind of, it's a friend of mine who was she was like a parenting kind of coach sort of thing. And I said, oh, what do you do in your courses with the parents? She said, I just lower their expectations. And I think right now, that's what we all have to do, is just lower our own expectations. We can't have this, as much as it's horrible. The thing I know is it's not going to go forever. A vaccine will be found, a cure will be found. It will not go forever. So therefore, in the meantime, can we all just lower some expectations? And it can be hard, but it's certainly releasing. And I think that's one of the other things too to think about is, can I just surrender to this in a way? To go, I have no control. I can't do this. What can I do, which is what we're talking about, but then just surrender to I have no control over it. So just griping about that won't make it a better experience for you.
And I think that's easier for some than others. Yeah. Certainly in my world, there are people who are very frightened about the global implications and where our world is going and what it's going to mean, and people who don't believe in vaccinating and what it's, so there are people, everyone is in pain on some different level, no matter what future you envisage for every person, no matter what your worldview is. There is something about the long-term future that is either highly undesirable, unpalatable, or just unfathomable. So I find this both pain-inducing and helpful to recognize that in a way we are all experiencing just different forms of pain, but we are all going through something terrible together. In the interest of time, should we talk about our introverted thinkers, our ISTPs and our INTPs, and how they might be finding the world at the moment and how they can help themselves a little bit?
They're often looking for that ISTPs and INTPs are the best problem definers. Figuring out exactly what it is we're trying to do is one way to look at it. And Jill, I'm going to flip this back to you, since the person you are sheltered in place with is an introverted thinker.
I feel very lucky that I am sheltered with an ISTP. We've been going through an issue with our council, and I was talking to someone we all know, Liz, with ENTP preferences, and I was chatting a little bit about my struggles, and she said, why are you getting involved? You're living with the best problem solver that there is. I mean, ISTPs, if you didn't have one, you'd go and find one to solve this problem for you. And it was like, yeah, she's totally right. And so ISTPs are really terrific at solving problems. And often what they do is the problem is so clear to them in the definition that you're often involved in some kind of solution before you even realize that a problem has been tabled, ratified, agreed with, voted on. We've just moved on to here's what we're doing. And so from that perspective, that sense of being able to define a problem, that this is their gift to the world. And because it's an introverted function, they're often not, you don't sit down and say, right, let's define the problem. We just have moved on from that spot. This is ISTP. INTPs, I suspect, approach things a little bit differently when they move into the extroverted function.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think's most difficult right now?
I am wondering whether for INTPs it's thinking about global ramifications and where the world is headed and what this means for the world, not in terms of necessarily humanity. I would say that is an INFP burden and heartache of catastrophic proportions. That's my imaginings, but a sense of the pathway that the world is taking. I'm just guessing here. I don't know for sure. If you're watching and you have preferences for INTP, maybe you can answer that question. I would love to know, but that's what I wonder, whether or not is hurting their brains, is where we are heading and choices that are being made and how sensible those choices are, and whether they're based on the right information and all the conflicting information, and is there a convergence of this information? Is there an overarching model? There's all these different things that are happening, different provenances that are making decisions, and no sense of an integrated understanding.
One of the most respected epidemiologists in the United States happens to live in Minnesota and is very, very articulate and did a great article in the paper. And he said, we are doing things without having a focus.
Right.
We
Yeah.
haven't decided what our goals are. We haven't decided what the outcomes or what we want to have on the other side. And it is very, very dangerous to be making the decisions we're making without knowing
Yeah.
what. And you know, I can't. It was a great article. His name's Mike Osterholm, if you want to look it up, from
He just
Minnesota.
appeared on Australia's 7:30 report. So
Yeah.
Australians, if you have iView, get on. It was on last night on 7:30. He was very articulate.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't necessarily think he's an INTP, but I think he might have introverted thinking in his code, and I
Right.
think that's the kind of thing they're after. And the ISTPs, they've got to be seeing things going on where they're just going like, how did someone not do this? How did
Yeah.
someone not think of this? Why didn't this just happen? How, you know, why didn't our Target stores limit toilet paper the first day there started to be a run on it? Who was it? You know,
I know. Yeah, we have this. I've said to Dan, I'm not sure I can go grocery shopping with you anymore because you see the inconsistencies in the signs, and then you want to discuss it with the poor person who's putting our groceries through, for whom she has no involvement with that part of the store. So I don't think you can come with me anymore, because if she says, "Oh, you used to be able to have 4 of those, but now you can only have 2, and we haven't got the sign up," I just go, "Okay." Whereas you go, "What? But the sign," and I spent 5 minutes reading the sign, and it said I could have 4, and yeah.
So I think, you know, to help these people, there's once again this piece of going to the feeling function, and it could be as simple as, I can solve a problem for a neighbor. I can call that neighbor, find out what they need from the store, pick it up. That neighbor won't have to go to the store, and it's actually using the feeling function with your practicality. All those little problems that you can solve actually have a good purpose right now, if you think of them that way.
What can you solve rather than what you can't solve, which is the global problem. Unless you have to be one of the people researching this. I mean, I had a conversation with my INTP brother, and he was telling me that if Australia didn't go into lockdown, we'd likely actually have 1 million people. So our population is only 25 million, but he said basically 1 million people would die, potentially. So a lot of the numbers you see are, and that's his, you know, typical. He's gone down that research rabbit hole, which is something they will do quite easily. And he basically go, yeah, it's more like 1 million people, not just 100,000 people, sort of thing. And that's in a small population like Australia, where we don't live on top of each other like some cities of the world where the population is so dense.
So we've talked about the 4 thinking functions, and to me, thinking and feeling, it's a wonderful lens to look at what we're experiencing and how we need both. We definitely need clear logical thinking. There's no question about that. But clear logical thinking without the feeling side coming into it, that humanistic side, that compassionate, kindness, heart-led, can be very cold and seem very ruthless, which is never the intention of it, but that's how it can come across. So maybe we should seg into the 4 feeling functions and finish off with those.
And we have an ESFJ, extroverted feeling type, the other one being ENFJ. So Jill, I'm going to let you take the lead and explain this one.
Yeah, well, certainly one of the struggles that I'm having, and others of my type and ENFJs, is that lack of social structure, that lack of social connection. Just yesterday, I couldn't go and see a friend of mine. I was reading something online about restrictions and people being fined up to $2,000 for just driving around. And, you know, I cancelled this catch up. It was just me and her at her place, you know, it was all very appropriate, I thought. And that really, really hurt. You know, and I feel my heart is breaking for the world at the moment. You know, just on this program, this 7:30 report, they had all these grandchildren talking about how they miss their grandparents, and it was just terrible. It's just very heartbreaking. Just everyone in pain. It's really hard. I feel a lot of that, you know. I feel everybody I'm talking to is experiencing pain of some sort. Very hard to, you know that everyone is in some form of pain. And so I'm finding it hard on that level. But psychologically, I actually feel quite healthy. Emotionally, I just feel like an open, gaping wound, you know. So that's been hard for me.
And I think you've just illustrated the feeling function. It's that feeling the vibe in the community and what's being upheld and how are people doing. And it's your greatest gift. And of course, that is what is so tough right now. You know, our local newscast is ensuring that every night is ending with a positive story. And last night, little boy and his grandma were out walking on one of our lake beaches, and he said, well, the driftwood, we can put it together and make it look like little crosses, and we can bring crosses to people and give them hope, because of course this is Holy Week. And so he and his grandma have nailed, they're keeping a little log. They said very clearly, we will not take money for this. This is our gift. This is what the kids like 5 years old, but they've sent hundreds around the country when people have requested them. And you know, of course, the family's benefiting, and they're trying to, you know, I think of the gift to all the, and it's not that the rest of us don't have feelings. It's just, it's not our lead where, you know, you just illustrated it, that just thinking about, you know, the people in elder care whose families cannot see them. And all of these things are just, they're heart-wrenching. And that's the extroverted feeling. So, what are your biggest suggestions for extroverted feelers? Because it isn't all about just giving, trying to heal who you can, because you'll burn out. No.
A big one for me is allowing myself to feel my pain. That's, you know, been just a big one. Just to cry and have days where I just, or times, you know, where I just say, okay, I'm just going, and I'll say to my husband, I need to be on my own and feel sad. And that is really important. Even little things like we cancelled our big birthday trip. In the overall scheme of things, that means absolutely nothing. In the scheme of what's happening in the world, me cancelling my birthday trip, it does not even bear mentioning. But I have had some personal disappointment with that, and I have allowed myself to feel that. And so that's been really helpful, to give myself permission for that. And of course, the big thing is staying connected. And so saying yes when people, you know, say you want to catch up, and you know, having some sense that I am not completely alone, that has been really helpful as well. So, yeah, I mean, things like, you know, Sue getting in touch saying, let's catch up for a Zoom. And, you know, that was just really lovely, you know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank goodness for social media contact.
Yeah, can you imagine what this kind of thing was like in a time when we didn't have the ability to do this? Just, well, I mean, the access to information is both a blessing and a curse, because some of the information coming down the pike, I've had to insulate myself from it. It can literally ruin my entire day. If I read an obituary and it is heartrending, the effort that goes into putting myself back together to be functioning for the day, I have had to just close a lot of that stuff off. But at least we know that there is some global thing that's going on to put this into some form of context. Without that, can you imagine how confusing this would be to people? It would just be impossible to understand.
Yeah.
Is there any way you use your introverted thinking? So we were talking before about using your fourth or even your eighth function.
Yeah, well, actually, Sue and I were talking about this, the eighth function of extroverted thinking, because I used that a great deal in my professional life in project management. Having some kind of plan is really, really helpful. So I find that. And also that sense of stepping back from things, not dropping anchor on things too quickly, allowing some space around things, trying to put some understanding. So maybe that problem definition stuff. I think the way I do introverted thinking does not in any way resemble how somebody for whom introverted thinking is a dominant function. It doesn't look anything like it. It's just my version of doing it. It's some sort of, but some form of getting back from things, which you've talked about quite a bit in this session, Imogen, and I found it really helpful to be reminded of how important it is to balance that. I see it as a balance between thinking and feeling. That's how I experience that. And I think it's a seesaw. And I think it's really important when you feel yourself getting out of balance to say, okay, how can we bring, it doesn't have to be even Stevens, but how can we bring things back a little bit so that we're, you know, not every day is an exercise in feeling the world's pain.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, the introverted feeling types, where they're looking for congruence. They run their lives from a deep sense of values, and it's almost like they've got a tuning fork and they're going, does this ring true to who I want to be? Does how I dress ring true to who I want to be?
Right.
Does the action I'm taking today ring true? And so many of them are in values driven careers where they're trying to be helpers. And so
Yeah.
to be home and not doing the work, or in my book club, we have a nurse and a physician, both of whom are past 60, and there's a whole bunch of stuff they're not allowed to do now because they're over that age threshold for where, we're seeing the higher deaths for COVID-19. And they laughed about it, but you can also tell it hurts, that they're,
Yes.
they could do other things to support. That's not the issue, but it was just, it was interesting hearing them talk. And so I think, there's this piece of reminding yourself every day that you are of value, to the people who uphold the world's values and remind us of who we want to be, to find your value in what you're doing. Whether I've one INFP friend whom I have to answer here. I mean, she's been mailing out more cards to people, and she makes the cards by hand. And so she's reaching out in that format so that you've got a little bit of a physical thing. And then she asks you to, one of them is to color. And not that I'm a big colorer, but she just wants to see all the color and the things that she's doing with their artistic sense. And I can't remember where I'm supposed to post it. I'll find out and I'll do it. It's her birthday. So if you listen to this, Tanya, again, happy birthday. But, I think that's got to be the hardest thing on them. It's just being away from the way whether their contribution is in making a safe place for everybody in their work environment or caring for others or whatever. Being away from that has to be tough, let alone the values pieces that are going around, are threatened.
So I think the other thing what's their way of using, either TE or, extroverted thinking or introverted thinking to help them?
I was just thinking about that, Jane. I'll be interested in whether you add something different, but for ISFPs, I'm actually wondering whether or not just going to auxiliary function and using that introverted sensing piece, the ISFPs that we know are often really terrific at putting lovely outfits together, or they have a wonderful aesthetic in terms of their home or meals, or, paying extra attention to plating or, gardening or anything like that, that really brings out that SF piece and that sense of aesthetic beauty. And the INFPs, some of them, I think, are often the best, that they're putting up funny social media things or something that is expressing that uniqueness, the unique experience that they are having, a way that they can make a unique contribution. That originality piece seems to be so important for INFPs, that their contribution has that sense of, I don't know, uniqueness to it.
I think the one thing the INFPs have going for them is one of their heartfelt things is to be unique, and they've got these wonderful ideas that the practicalities of life have always kept them from pursuing. And I have heard some of them saying, they've actually pulled out projects they haven't finished and are enjoying having the time. And so, in a way, that the space, just like Imogen and I said, maybe our types have it the easiest. There's a piece of the space that the introverted feelers are getting that they're also taking advantage of in a different way. And then there's that objectivity, though, that I think is helpful. If we just go to the model of introverted thinking, what am I going to stay true to, or what am I going to remember out of this in a what principles should we hold to, or what's the true definition of making a contribution now that I've seen what it's like to be stymied in certain things, or whatever comes to it, that there's going to be some thinking around that for a lot of them.
Yeah, so. And this is where models like the Z model, we have 2 articles on our articles page using the Z model. They are applied to outfit creation and shopping, but the questions are easily morphed into any situation. So the Z model goes through each of the 8 functions that we've just talked about and a key question that each can ask. And the idea of it is that you get a more balanced and authentic, healthy kind of solution, whether it's practical or philosophical, when you access more than just one function, which often when we are not type aware, we're just running on autopilot. And this is where we can start to spin a little bit out. And this is where the Z model is a wonderful way to help us see other perspectives by asking a question that perhaps is not natural to us. But it's just a stepping stone. It just helps us to shift from where we are now, and from there, another step will emerge, or another giant cosmic leap, depending on your preferences.
You know, and there's posts on the website too about the stresses from style, but they're actually all following from the functions that we're talking about. So it might even be less painful to read about them in the framework of style, and then think, what does this mean in the environment we're in now, and how can I use that information to make the most of this? We're in this together separately, but you know, we're hoping that a few of the things we've said tonight might give you some insights into how to help whoever's around you, or to make the most of this uninvited break in what we thought was the best way to be living. So
yeah, so go to our articles page and you can just do a search for, say, the Z model or stress. Just put in the word stress and the 4 super styles will come up. So heaps of other articles there. So yeah, thanks for that reminder as well. I thought that was a great wrap up, Jay, and I don't really have much more to add to that, except thank you for watching, and we hope this has been helpful.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.